5 silenced shots pierced the air in a Kyiv parking lot. Once the dust had settled, the Ukrainian Secret Service or SBU commander Ivan Voronych lay dead. This was a massive loss for Ukraine, but it was one the country avenged almost immediately. Putin had sent a hit squad into Ukraine to take out Voronych. Ukraine has just wiped out that entire assassination team. But the loss of Voronych leaves a lot of questions about the future of the Ukraine war. The Russian attack took place in broad daylight on July 10th. As Voronych left a residential building carrying bags in his hands, a man rushed up to him. There was no scuffle. The SBU member was caught by surprise, giving the assassin time to pull out a silenced pistol and fire 5 shots into his victim. Chaos ensued in the aftermath as the SBU put all of its best minds into figuring out who the assassins were and how they had managed to get so close to Voronych. Information was pieced together. CBS News reports that the SBU worked out that the assassins were given specific coordinates for Voronich's location, suggesting that there may have been a leak somewhere in the SBU. The assassins also didn't act hastily. They'd spent days, perhaps even weeks, watching Voronich to determine his daily schedule and any routes he commonly took. Perhaps this is what led them to the parking lot near the residential building. The Kyiv police also took part in the investigation, sending special officers, dog handlers, and other personnel to the scene to glean whatever evidence they could. Euromaidan Press offers more details. It says that the head of the SBU, Lieutenant General Vasil Malyuk, personally oversaw the organization's investigation. He gave the order to locate the foreign hit squad, watching as his organization conducted a covert investigation and used their own counterintelligence methods to locate the assassin. For a short while, the assassin managed to stay hidden, but not for long. On July 13th, news broke that the SBU had gotten their target, or targets as it turned out to be. Though the CCTV footage released of Voronich's attackers only showed one who fired the shots, it turns out that a foreign couple, operating under the orders of Russia's Federal Security Service or FSB, had collaborated to hunt down the SBU commander and coordinated his killing. Their names were Zakhany Gulalizade, born in 1981, and Narmin Gulieva, born a decade later. Those names haven't been officially announced yet, Euromaidan Press reports. However, wanted alerts were placed for both of them mere hours after the assassination, suggesting that they were SBU's targets. And the SBU didn't take long to take them out. Following their investigation, the SBU cornered the duo at a hideout in Kyiv. A firefight ensued. Gulalizade and Gulieva are now dead. The SBU has confirmed their successful counterstrike and released a statement on July 13th. This morning, a special operation was conducted, during which members of the Agent Combat Group of the FSB of the Russian Federation began to resist, so they were eliminated, the SBU statement said. The murder of the Ukrainian defender was committed by 2 people, a man and a woman. Their supervisor ordered them to monitor the SBU officer, establish his daily schedule and routes. Later, the Russians handed over the coordinates of a cache to the killers, where there was a pistol with a silencer. That statement shows us this was a well-planned operation. For all of Russia's intelligence failures throughout the Ukraine war, this was an example of what the country can do when it gets it right. But Ukraine responded, and responded quickly. If Russian President Vladimir Putin had any hopes of his operatives returning home to participate in future missions, those hopes have been dashed, and Ukraine has made sure he knows it. Soon after announcing their successful operation, the SBU posted a video to X, including another statement. But far more chilling is what's seen toward the end of the video. The SBU member delivering the statement moves to the side, and for a brief moment, we see 2 bodies. They are Gulalizade and Gulieva, the 2 assassins who died in the firefight after their hideout was ambushed. What we have here is an example of the covert shadow war being waged between Ukraine and Russia. While the main battle grabs all of the headlines, and rightfully so thanks to its massive casualty rate, there is a war between the secret services of each country going on behind the scenes. Ukraine has been winning that war. It's carried out far more successful assassinations, as we'll discuss later in the video. However, Russia has just claimed a massive scalp in its attempts to destabilize Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine enacted almost immediate revenge, but the loss of Voronich will be felt throughout the country. Why? Because Voronich was the mind behind many of Ukraine's recent successes against Russia. Voronich was far more than just another intelligence officer working within the SBU. He was one of Ukraine's foremost spies and one of its best intelligence operatives. In its report on his assassination, Euromaidan Press provides a brief rundown of his career highlights. It says that Voronich's career in the SBU began in the mid-1990s and that his career reads like a spy thriller. During those early days, Voronich commanded a unit that worked alongside the CIA, receiving technical support from the American Secret Service. That support allowed Voronich to oversee the assassinations of several of Russia's key proxy commanders, demonstrating that Voronich had already caused plenty of damage to Russia. One of those assassinations took place in 2016 when Voronich's unit took part in the killing of Arsen Pavlov. Also referred to as Motorola, Pavlov was one of Putin's proxy commanders who rallied the pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass when Russia first began its campaign of aggression against Ukraine in 2014. 2 years after that campaign, Pavlov was dead thanks to Voronich's unit, and Putin had lost a key figurehead in a region of Ukraine that he's still trying to claim as Russia's own during his brutal invasion. Beyond that, there's little known about Voronich. That shouldn't come as a surprise. As one of Ukraine's foremost intelligence officers, most of what he did would be kept under wraps. It had to be, or else Ukraine would risk revealing secrets to its enemies. However, we do know one more of Voronich's exploits, which perhaps reveals the reason why Putin chose to target him. Voronich was a key figure behind Ukraine's Kursk invasion. In August 2024, Ukraine pulled off a startling counter-invasion of Russian territory. Just 2 weeks after crossing the border, sources say, Ukraine claimed that it had seized between 82 and 93 Russian settlements and over 450 square miles of the country's territory. Putin was livid. This represented the first time that another country had successfully invaded Russian soil since World War II, and it took Russia's leader a long time to do anything about it. It wasn't until the end of April that Putin claimed that Russia had managed to kick Ukraine out of Kursk. The country paid a heavy price to do so. Ukraine says that Russia lost 62,400 soldiers in its counteroffensive in the Kursk Oblast, a number that took a massive toll on Russia's military and may be part of the reason why Putin's summer offensive in Sumy is faltering. Voronich was vital to all of this. Once the Ukraine war started, Euromaidan Press says, Voronich began operating in what it calls the grey zone between the front lines. It was his unit that conducted the initial crossing of the border into Kursk, setting the stage for a watershed moment in the war in several ways. Kursk was a humiliation for Putin. It was a massive blow to the image of the strong man that he had tried to cultivate for so long, as well as an exposure of his terrible tactics and inability to defend Russia's borders. It also represented the first time that Ukraine had attacked Russia on its own territory in earnest, as well as being an operation that provided Ukraine with much-needed leverage against Russia. It also made a mockery of Putin's supposed red lines, as Euromaidan Press explains. Perhaps most importantly, the offensive laid Russia's nuclear threats bare, showing them to be empty rhetoric designed to manipulate Western support for Ukraine. The operation succeeded in making a complete mockery of Vladimir Putin's red lines. As one analyst put it, yet no nuclear escalation followed. Putin hated Voronich. He hated the SBU man for killing one of his key proxies in the Donbass, with that hatred only growing after the Kursk fiasco. The July 10th assassination was a long time coming in Putin's eyes. Russia's leader had clearly waited for as long as was needed to exact his revenge on one of Ukraine's leading military minds. Ukraine's counter came swiftly as it took out the two people responsible for Voronich's death. However, there's no arguing the fact that in this particular exchange, Russia seems to have come out on top. After all, Putin has already sacrificed over 1.03 million of his soldiers to slowly take territory in Ukraine, the country's Ministry of Defense claims. What are 2 deaths more if they come in exchange for the life of one of Ukraine's leading military minds? And that brings us to what all of this means for the war. First, the assassination of Voronich shows us that the shadow war we mentioned earlier between Ukraine and Russia is starting to escalate. This wasn't any old commander that Russia took out. It was a leading operative within the SBU, an experienced soldier upon whom Ukraine relied to both advise on and conduct some of its most vital clandestine operations. Euromaidan Press says that this escalation doesn't mean that the rules, such as they are, of this shadow war have changed. Those rules have already evolved several times during the war and will continue to do so as time goes on. But Voronich's death is significant because it represents the first time that Russia has managed to get through to a very high-value target, penetrating all of Ukraine's well-laid defenses in the process. Ukraine now knows for sure that Russian operatives are working on its soil. It'll also be asking a lot of questions, especially about how those operatives were able to discern Voronich's location in the first place. Was there a leak within the SBU? Did Russia have its own people scouring Kyiv looking for Voronich? Was it all a stroke of luck, with a Russian operative just happening to see Voronich, sparking a full-blown and successful assassination attempt? The public may never learn the answers to these questions, but the SBU in Ukraine will be searching for them as they try to patch whatever holes exist in its security setup that allowed the assassination to happen. The destruction of Russia's hit squad so soon after the assassination may go some way to plugging those holes, but Ukraine will need to do more. UPI refers to what happened between July 10th and 13th as a trading of blows between Ukraine and Russia's respective secret service. It's Ukraine that has landed the deadliest blows in their shadow war so far. UPI points to Operation Spiderweb, which we covered in detail in the video, in-depth analysis of Ukraine's unbelievable Operation Spiderweb, as the moment that escalated the shadow war. In that exceptionally constructed assault on Russia's territory, Ukraine managed to sneak a small horde of first-person view drones into Russia, eventually using them to strike 4 of Russia's airfields. Operation Spiderweb cost Putin $7 billion and the use of several of his bombers and spy planes. Did Voronych have a hand in Operation Spiderweb? We don't know, and it may never be confirmed. But given how vital he was to many of the SBU's missions, it stands a good chance that Putin wanted revenge on him for that humiliating strike as well. The tit-for-tat spy battle between Russia and Ukraine has only escalated from there. Just days after Operation Spiderweb, the FSB put out a press release claiming that it had made numerous arrests, including the capture of an SBU agent working in Crimea. That agent was supposedly planning to use an improvised explosive device to carry out some form of sabotage. Russia was sending a message to Ukraine here. Yes, Ukraine may have hit it hard with Operation Spiderweb. However, that only prompted the FSB to step up its game when it came to tracking Ukrainian operatives on Russia's territory, or in Crimea's case, territory that Russia has illegally annexed and still occupies. Ukraine delivered its own message in response. On June 3rd, the SBU announced the arrest of an FSB agent working in the Ukrainian city of Kyiv. That operative had managed to penetrate Ukraine's military to the point where he was serving as part of an assault brigade under the National Guard of Ukraine, the SBU's press release said, and he did a lot of damage in that role. The agent adjusted Russian airstrikes on the locations of his own unit, the SBU claimed. While serving as a platoon commander, he passed to the occupiers the coordinates of staffs, training centers, and reserve points of the military unit where he served. The enemy asset was also supposed to pass his handler lists of brigade officers and the information on the strength of the brigade from company to battalion. The captured Russian operative now faces life in prison. Since that initial spurt of arrests, both the SBU and FSB have been publicizing other captures of their opponents' operatives. On June 10th, the FSB claimed to have stopped a Ukrainian agent from attacking a civilian gathering. In response, Ukraine said it had captured a 57-year-old man who scouted air bases for Russia, along with a woman who was building improvised explosive devices that were to be used in car bombing. The prevention of more bombings, arrests of agents accused of leaking information, and more all followed. The shadow war, which was already being fought behind the scenes, exploded. Voronych and the hit squad that took him out are just the latest in a long line of victims as Russia and Ukraine attempt to attack each other in the grey zones, away from the front lines. This escalation will worry Ukraine. After all, it had been coming out on top in the shadow war up until this point. Beyond Operation Spiderweb, it had succeeded in carrying out far more assassinations than Russia has managed. Allegedly, it should be noted that Ukraine doesn't officially take credit for these assassinations, though it's practically guaranteed that it has been behind them. It was Ukraine that managed to take out a prominent Russian general with a car bomb in Moscow back in April, with that bomb also causing a blaze that gutted the car. 4 months before that, another explosion in Moscow claimed the life of another Russian general. In 2024, Ukraine also managed to take out the head of Russia's chemical weapons unit, Igor Kirillov, using a bomb planted in a scooter. That attack was so major that it forced Putin to admit that Russia's internal security was failing, with CBS News reporting him as saying, "We must not allow such very serious blunders to happen." Still, that had been the pattern of the shadow war. Ukraine was killing key Russian personnel. Putin's FSB was having less success, whether that be due to the group focusing more on its failed efforts to protect Russia's generals or because it wasn't focusing on strikes within Ukraine. With the assassination of Voronych, the FSB seems to have shifted its focus. Ukraine will be especially disturbed by the fact that Russia's hit squad managed to penetrate and operate within Kyiv. This was not some rogue operative working away on the front lines, where it's difficult to discover what they're doing. It was at least 2 and potentially more, all working in Kyiv to track and eliminate a target. Of course, we can't forget that Ukraine has taken out that hit squad, demonstrating the strength of its intelligence agents. It only took them 3 days to identify and zero in on the locations of Russia's assassins as they attempted to escape Ukraine. Russia may have proven itself capable of operations at a level of sophistication it hadn't yet shown during Putin's invasion. But Ukraine responded in kind and enacted revenge. More will likely be coming. Ukraine will want to deliver an answer to Putin by taking out another of his key generals in exchange for Voronich's life. The deaths of the SBU commander's assassins won't be enough. The odds are high that we'll soon be hearing about another successful SBU operation that takes out a key Russian figure sooner rather than later. Speaking of the SBU, the question has to be asked, what does the loss of Voronich mean for the group? The SBU certainly won't be in turmoil. Though losing Voronich is a massive blow, the group has proven itself time and time again to be extremely effective. Still, the loss will be felt. As Euromaidan Press points out, there's no replacing the decades of operational knowledge that Voronych brought to the table. He was a man who knew how to get things done, and he proved it many times. Ukraine will likely respond by increasing the security details around its other key SBU operatives, along with ensuring that its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, isn't at risk. But the SBU will still be effective. Proof of that comes from the fact that it's just taken out Russia's assassination team. Putin's success, though major, was short-lived. An escalation of the shadow war is coming, and Ukraine will be hoping that this battle of subterfuge and clandestine action will work out in its favor. Perhaps Ukraine's success will be aided by the fact that Japan has just given it access to an all-seeing eye in the sky that allows it to track Russian troop movements. Find out more in our video covering Japan's massive move, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.